And as you think about your experience, if you were around the Christian faith, particularly people that were, very devout or very much about these are the rules and this is how you get yourself to heaven, do the 800 verses that you have in your mind, do they play in the back of your mind as you're having these experiences saying, I was told not to do this?
Like a little bit, but I don't feel shame anymore at all. Because it feels like so clearly fine to me. I think like if I were trying to make myself do something I felt a little bit uncomfortable with, then I might be like, oh, they said that for a reason. But it seems like so clearly good that it's just, I can't even, oh, thank you. Food. It's not, but sometimes I feel like a little bit ironically, like, oh, it's so funny that like if only these people could see me now as I'm like in the middle of like a heaving mass of naked bodies, like that would be funny.
So when people come to you and they ask for this advice, do you think that this is a path that many people should go down? Like, I don't really know how to ask the question other than maybe the blunt way, which is, if you had a daughter, would you want her to go into the line of work that you've gone into?
I mean, it depends. I went into the line of work. I would like my children to not, actually, I'm not sure if I say that. I was going to say not need to work at all. Don't know if that's true. I would like to have my children in the place where they never had to try to do something that they were uncomfortable with. It's like, I did this because like I didn't have anywhere else to go in a sense. And I would prefer my child not to have to make a decision out of that. I think I would be okay with it given I felt really convinced that this is good for her. As in this is like aligned with the type of personality she has and like the best option for her out of the other options. I don't think I have like a kind of a disgust reaction towards thinking that. Again, I'm not a mother, so it's possible once I have kids, the feelings will change.
You mentioned like not feeling shame. This is an interesting thing, right? Like I think a lot about the difference between embarrassment and shame, right? And embarrassment being, I was walking with a tray of food and I tripped and I spilled it everywhere and I get up and my face is red and people clap and I maybe take a bow to like signal this is a behavior that is different than me. So you're separating yourself, right? And shame being that thing that you do it, and as you experience it, there's no like standing up to take a fake bow. There's no, you just want to hide your head and cover your eyes and get away from people. You want to crawl into a hole. I've always thought of shame as a very important role in society to maintain the layers of culture not changing too quickly. But you just said something very interesting, that you don't feel shame. So what do you think about shame and its role in controlling culture?
So I'm going to use a small analogy for this. I'm not religious. If somebody listening is religious, let's imagine a religion that you don't agree with, like Islam or something. Islam was like very useful for a lot of their culture. Like it gave them like certain behavioral norms that made them more successful in the way that they operated. And this was like good for that. And they had to like believe, it only really worked if they like believed in, all of the rules and whatever. But it's not like really true. So something can be like useful in a context, but also not necessarily true or useful in other contexts. And I think the same is very true about shame. I think that shame is, you're right, it is useful for society in a similar way that like ancient religions were useful for their society. And I'm not going to say like, oh, you shouldn't feel shame willy-nilly, because like maybe that's like what you need for that context. But again, I don't think that this is an absolute thing. I think that this is sort of like an invented, I don't really support that word, but like a constructed emotion that's designed to change your behavior to fit with the whole. And I don't think that it's like tied into anything like really meaningful or true. Like ultimately, what is there to be shamed about? Like you're just doing what makes sense for you in the moment, given your personality and incentives and the things you've experienced. Like really, what else were you going to do? And so if from this perspective, it doesn't make sense to feel shame. And I feel no shame. That seems to be true. I'm just checking to see if there's any shame in there.
That's interesting. Like, so, in the Jordan Petersonian kind of way of thinking, he describes sin not as like a defiance of God, but a missing of the mark, right? Like where it's actually an archery term describing that when you sin, you are missing where you were supposed to be headed. Do you think with not having shame, do you still have a true sense of where you are supposed to be or what you should be doing?
So those are interesting words, like supposed to and should. Like there's a lot in those words that sort of indicates that there's some sort of standard, like could be like God and morality, you know, has like of the thing, and then you're supposed to, like, in contrast to that. Or maybe like supposed to in the fact of like, I designed a plan for my life and am I adhering to that? But like my point is that those words assume like some sort of external framework that I either am matching or am not. And I don't have that. So like those words don't really make sense because there's nothing for me to supposed to do, really. I enjoy, like, I have goals that I like, and I have those goals because like I check inside myself and I feel good when I move towards them. But I don't think I feel like I'm supposed to do anything or that I should do anything.
And do you think, what do you think do you think culture is moving more in the direction that you're already at? Or is that you're just a rare person that stands outside on the periphery and the world is going to go where it's going to go?
I'm not sure. So I know that like a lot of people perceive the world as doing something similar to what I'm doing, or like moving in that direction. And I think that this is actually kind of untrue or misleading. I think that a lot of people are using some sort of similar ideas to me, like, oh, you shouldn't have to do it, there is no truth, whatever, as a way to like sort of force in their idea of truth. I know this is like a little bit vague and
no, this is great. Keep going. This is great.
Yeah, I just sometimes I hear like people talk about this, and I think that it's sort of like they're like sort of hiding actually like full structures and other types of shame inside of saying that there should not be shame. And so I don't think I identify with that. And I think if that is where the world is going, if I'm correct about that, then there's just another version slightly more hidden of like the religious styles of the past. And I think I would be unusual in that regard.
Wow. Okay. So that actually strikes in me the concept of, so my belief is I think the amount of chaos that has happened in the world in certainly the last 9 months, probably the last 20 years, that I think that religion is going to come back in a big way. And I don't think that's projection, because I'm not a particularly devout person. I'm definitely open to the idea of the church, because I think the fact that it's so lindy means that it had some values there or some wisdom that is worth deeply trying to understand before I write it off, like the way that I did in college. But I get the sense that people will move more towards that structured center, even if it forces them to do things or agree with things that they don't like, because it will help make sense of a world that has become too chaotic for multiple generations to be in uncertainty in a way that we've not been in the past.
Yeah, and this might also be true. Like the world is very big, and there's lots of different movements that are doing different things with different incentives. And it's possible that like that is exactly what's going to happen with some people. I don't know to what degree it makes sense to describe that as like an overall motion of culture. Like maybe it does. I have also some friends who are going trad, and I'm like, why are you becoming religious? Another thing that I don't know.
What does that mean, going trad? You're the second guest to use the word, but I think there are a lot of my viewers that have no idea what it means to be trad.
I'm not going to do it justice, but I can try. There's a lot of people in my mentions who are like trad, and those are like value women giving birth and men being the provider, like sort of a traditional way of being. I think they kind of do it a little bit more like meta, sort of like we're like intentionally doing this as opposed to it being put onto us by our culture.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, I could be.
That's
wrong,
the thing that I think is growing. And I didn't realize that's what trad meant. I knew it meant traditional values, but I didn't think about it at the meta level. And I think that the reason that is so important is because that choice component, right? It wasn't like you were just raised in the church and you're just perpetuating the beliefs that were handed to you. Mm-hmm. It was like you left and you decided to come back. And then when you came back on your own terms. And so it means something different.
Yeah, I like that idea. The thing that I don't like about it is that a lot of trads, at least the ones I've encountered, might not be all of them, tend to really hate me and my sex work.
That's big
yeah,
part
that's
of that.
The problem.
Right?
I feel like I'm very I like movements regardless of what they are, as long as they feel sort of like inclusive of differences. Or sort of like, this is what I want, and it's okay if you do something else. But like movements that feel reliant on other people who are not like accepting your worldview, needs to accept your worldview, then I'm like less a fan of it. So I like the idea of trad as long as you're okay with me doing my thing over here.
Yeah, and I think that was a point that I wanted to talk about, which was for the first time maybe ever, I've started seeing people push back on sex work as work, right? And so from the moment I was in college, where even though it was a Catholic university, they were saying we need to get rights to people that are in prostitution. It needs to be legalized. It should be safer. It should be done in these more institutionalized ways. And so from that run for the next 20 years, I never heard anybody say anything other than that, unless they were some kind of crotchety old religious person. And now I'm watching a whole new front move in where there's people saying we shouldn't normalize this, and in fact we should stigmatize it. And I actually wondered as we were talking, like, or before we started talking, like, is there a downside to showing the normalness of a person that lives such a different life? And I ultimately came to the conclusion that I was deeply curious about who you were, but I think there are a lot of people that want to push you out now. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.